Welcome, Joanne, tonight. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you, Christine, for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be with all of you tonight. And as Dr. De La Rosa mentioned, Boston University recently joined the consortium. And I think it has a lot to do with the fact that she's here, and also Dr. Roldan is also a professor here. And we have amazing PhD students already in the program, Sochi. And that all helps us do the work that we do and do it better. Let me give you a little bit of history about the Hispanic Theological Initiative. It began in 1996 at Emory University, and it was a way to build a pipeline because there were so little professors, Hispanic professors in theological and religious studies. And so the couple, very few older scholars, Hispanic scholars, and now unfortunately 2 of these have already passed away, began this program, and it started out helping master's students, PhD students, and postdoctoral fellows, and for them to write their books and get tenure. And the Pew Charitable Trust was very generous in their funding. It was solely funded by the Pew Charitable Trust at that time. We were in a consortium. We would accept students from any university or any seminary as long as they met the criteria and the standards that the HTI was required for them to meet, which was for them to be academically adept and also for them to have a commitment to their grassroots religious communities. We started out ecumenical, we remain ecumenical, multidisciplinary and multi-ethnic. You all know that the Hispanic community, that's a nomenclature. Really, we really stand for 23 countries and islands. And so there's such diversity within these communities, and also denominationally, we represent a lot of different denominations, and that's the beauty. That's what makes this program so exciting for me, to be able to lead and continue to move forward. Since that program began, we graduated. We helped 43 master students graduate and go on to either be ministers or do PhD studies. And then in 2003, Pew, grants from foundations don't last a long time. They usually give you some money, and then you have to see how you're going to support what you do. So we didn't continue the masters. We just didn't have the funding for that at that time. But we did continue the PhDs. We went from a Cadillac version, and this is what I tell people, because we had a lot of money, to a Camry. And if you know, they both get you there, and you're comfortable, right? So that's what we did, and we've been very successful at continuing to help PhD students graduate. We've graduated 91 scholars, and we have done it. Our success rate compared to any ethnic group, if you know anything about PhD studies, 50% of students in PhD studies drop out completely. And those that remain take between 7 and 9 years to graduate. And when they do graduate, many of them can't find a job. And they're exhausted. They are not joyful about what they started, what they were passionate about. And so that's very sad. Those statistics are very sad. And institutions pay between $200,000 and $300,000 to help one PhD student get their PhD. So HTI has been able to do 97% success rate and graduated scholars in an average time of 5.5 years. And 87% of them are employed as professors. Now that's impressive, but we're only 3% of scholars in universities and seminaries, so there's still a lot of work that we need to do. That's why we're excited about, and funding is also an issue. Funding, most of the time, funders also continue to fund the traditional things they fund. They usually don't fund the new and the stuff that's really making a difference. So we've had some funding challenges, but we creatively thought about the consortium, which is we started in 2007, a consortium of PhD granting institutions. We started with 17 schools in 2007, and now we're at 27 schools. Actually, this brochure we just finished it in November, and it's outdated. There are 2 schools that are missing from this brochure already. And so, like Christian mentioned, we have Boston University. They sent us a student last year, Monica Ray, and this year we actually have 2, and we have some funding from the Henry Luce Foundation that helps us support students at the dissertation level. And I am delighted to share with you this evening that Sochi is one of those fellows for this year. And some of the statistics that I shared with you are in this brochure, and I am sorry that I didn't bring enough. We actually ran out of them, so we're getting them reprinted. But there are some in the back, and my business card is in the back if you want to have more information about the Hispanic Theological. This is a very concise, very clear way of showing anyone about the success. Now, HTI scholars are nationally represented and even globally. We have some in Mexico teaching, we have some in Europe, and the schools are also nationally represented. And then these are all the partnerships. One of the things that has been very, very intentional about what we do is we try to collaborate with not only the schools, but other PhD granting institutions and other theological programs, and even outside of theological education and religious education, we're also partnering with educational partners. And so we have a partnership with the American Council of Education, where some of our scholars are going there to think about and potentially become presidents of universities and seminaries. We also have connections with Excelencia in Education, which is a program that instead of speaking about the bleakness, which is unfortunate about the Hispanic community, it speaks about its successes. And that's very important because we have something to contribute. We have something to contribute to a lot of different institutions and in many different ways. We're multidisciplinary. And if you think about religion, you think about theology, it is about the value system. A person's value system, it's the core of who we are, right? So if you're able to instruct people about their values, you're able to influence life in so many different ways. So even though these numbers may seem low to you, this brochure, which we publish once a year, shows that our 91 scholars have influenced more than 676 institutions across the nation. Churches, programs, nonprofits, seminaries, and we have one of our scholars represented here who was in the Faith Commission with the President. We have another scholar that has been for the Holy Ambassador for the Catholic Church with the Pope. We have 3 Latina scholars writing a book together. That's another thing that we contribute to theological religion. People writing together so that not one person has the answer, but that many different voices can be heard and contribute to the conversation. So we're constantly in conversation with one another. As I mentioned, we're represented nationally. Here's someone who went to Peru and decided to write a dissertation. And these are the scholars that have been supported. Last year was supported by the Hispanic Theological Initiative, and there's 25 years for last year. This year we expect to have between 30 and 35. So the program continues to grow. We continue to do very empowering things. There are some of these brochures in the back, and again, I didn't bring enough because we ran out of these as well. For some reason this year we're running out of. We have deans. She's a dean at a community college. But if you want our materials, my business card is in the back, my information is in the back of the brochure, and I'll be more than happy if you're even interested in doing PhD studies. We work very closely with the Formation Forum for Theological Exploration, which used to be the Fund for Theological Education. And so my role this past weekend, somebody said I'm an encourager. So my role is to encourage each and every one of you to seek the highest level of education, not just for the prestige and the eliteness of PhD studies, which has been in the past, but because learning is a process and we're always learning, and we need educated individuals to help make a difference in education for everyone at every level. And so the more people we have out there that are educated, that seek education as a, not just as an end to a goal, but as a learning process for the rest of your life, you can really make a difference. And that's what I love about this program, and I encourage everyone to seek your passion in education and get the best resources. And Boston University is a place that can afford you that, and so are also many of the other schools that are listed here. There's some of the top. We have Harvard as a member, we have Princeton Theological Seminary, we have really exceptional schools in this consortium, and we're here to support the students that are thinking about PhD studies and almost there to apply for PhD studies. And I'm available. I know I have to leave tonight early. I already told Christian that I have a flight at 8:30, but I'm always available by email or phone. Thank you very much for the time that you've given me to speak today, and I'm available to answer any questions that you may have.
We have a couple of minutes if you have a question about what Joanne mentioned or anything else that you might be interested in regards to Latinos in academia. Yes, Sasha?
I know how much you all do to support so many scholars. Obviously, I'm one. And what are the ways that you all look for partnerships and to be supported? What are the ways for us to be attentive to how we can help support the collective work that you all do?
I think that this is a perfect example of supporting the Hispanic Theological Initiative, bringing us to your institution so that we can share the good news about the scholars that we have available. You play a role as an ambassador. The more excellent you are, each of you in your role, the stronger this program is identified with you. It's reciprocal. So be the best that you can be at every level of your studies and as an academic person. And also, you know, we do take donations. So if you want to donate some finances, we will receive the money. I mean, it helps us continue to do the important work that we do, or financial connections that you may have. Maybe, you know, in theological and religious education, professors don't make a lot of money, and we understand that. But if there's someone who believes, you know, someone who's a business person that really believes, or that's wealthy that believes in what we do, that would be a great resource for us to have. There are many different ways. Write. I encourage the Latino community to write more. That is the way that we can reach. And I applaud you, Movimientos.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I applaud you for what you're doing, because the students are the ones that have a voice in the curriculum of every institution. And you have to say to yourself, you're an educated, I don't know who remembers Sims, an educated consumer is our best customer. You're consumers of your education. And you need to voice that you needed the curriculum. The curriculum is going to help you be better at what you do. The United States is changing drastically. The Latino community is one of the, it's just, the statistics I believe are less than, because many immigrant communities are not even counted in the census. And so we're not a minority. But unfortunately, we're one of the least educated communities. And that causes major problems for our people. Financial problems, economic problems, housing problems, all kinds of problems. So we need to be educating, and the curriculum needs to be speaking to our communities. And many curriculums across the nation are not speaking. Our history is erased. I didn't know, I'm Puerto Rican, I was born in the United States, I was born in New York. I was never taught by a Puerto Rican teacher. I never learned my history until I was in my 30s. You know, so that makes a huge difference in your life when you're not being taught those things. And so I applaud you for making sure that the curriculum includes our voices as well. There's enough room at the table. And the scarcity is something that is, how do I say this? It's implemented in people's minds to create fear, so they don't speak up. But we're not a scarce nation. There's tremendous amounts of resources in the United States, and we could be at the table as well. And we need people to speak up. So I encourage you to speak up and to speak about curriculum and how to bring those voices to the curriculum. Thank you for doing the work that you do.
Joan, would you, I heard that the Hispanic Community Institute has a part of the program to prepare students who want to apply to PhD programs, how to write those statements, how to get better prepared for the theory, all that stuff. Do they, anything like that?
We do have, I play the role of a coach. If you call me, I can play the role of a coach and tell you A, B, and C. But what we do is once you're accepted in a PhD program, at one of the 27 schools, we provide a mentor for you for 3 years. And when you're at the dissertation level, we provide an editor. We also provide the summer workshop. We have requirements where you have to publish by a certain time, where you have to teach by a certain time. We have workshops where we encourage you to write write your syllabus and write your teaching philosophy and do job interviews, so that when you're done, you have all of those things, all those tools to work with when you go out and you look for a job. There's also a lot of networking with senior scholars and younger scholars, where you begin to create a pool of people that you can depend on while you're doing your PhD studies. It doesn't have to be as isolated as it's made out to be, or fearful as it's made out to be.
Thank you, Joanne. I just want to say publicly, make here this confession. I was with HTI from 1998 to the year 2003. HTI helped me when I did my Master's of Divinity and when I was a student here at the School of Theology. They gave me a lot of financial support. But the most important thing, more important than the money, was that every year we will go to a gathering and we will talk about seminary, School of Theology, work, doctoral work. That support network was very important for me. It was incredible. Being able to learn. I learned so much. So when I went to do interviews for faculty openings, I knew what to do because HTI took the time to tell me how to do a job interview. And the record was not bad. I mean, I think that in 8 years I have applied for 5 positions and I got 3 of them. So they really helped me a lot. And there are many things that come with, she mentioned that she comes from Puerto Rico and all of that. I knew the history of Puerto Rico, but it was really difficult to overcome certain inhibitions that you inherited from a situation of colonialism. And that's what that support group did. It helped me really to overcome many of those inhibitions. So thank you very much, because she was there all that time. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne. I also want to thank you because I'm also a graduate from the Hispanic Theological Initiatives. I applied to only one job and I got it. but definitely it has to do with what you're talking about, because before we actually finish, we have to have all of the documentation we're going to present. We usually present at a job interview. So thank you, Joanne. As a closing, can you please explain how an institution becomes part of the Hispanic Theological Initiative and what seminaries like this one should be doing to facilitate, similar to what you're doing in terms of encouraging? We work mostly with master level students, they're the majority. So definitely we're looking at a Master's of Divinity with track with a track on academics. And then the MTSs, some of them are preparing to go into the academy. What are things that you might, that you believe will help us to prepare them better?
I think one of the most important things is that an institution recognizes the potential it has with Latino students. Once the institution recognizes that the population is changing and they need to educate this population and they're willing to invest in that, then I think that's the best way to get a member. We have members, to be honest with you, that haven't sent us a student and they've been a member since the first day. Those are not the kind of members that we want. I will not mention names, but those are not the members that we want. We want members that know, that understand what the memorandum of understanding for HTIC is, and are committed to making that happen, which is they sign on and they know there's an expense for what we're providing the students, but they know they're going to, it's a win-win situation for them. And they send the students. So Boston University is a perfect example of that. And I think that that happened because both of you were HTI scholars, knew what this program had to offer, and you also spoke about that, and you shared that with your dean and with your president. So having someone who has experienced this has been vitally important. Most of the schools that have committed that way, that have become partners that way, are actual partners. The schools that don't have anyone there have just signed on, but they haven't been as committed or have not sent students. We're here to provide a service for the scholars that are in this institution. So if you have a Latino PhD student, then we want to have that student, because we know what we offer them. We know that it's been successful. I forgot to mention that in 2010, HTI won the Excelencia in Education Award. And it was really exciting. We went to Washington, D.C. to get this award, and one of the committee members that was on the selection committee, she ran up to me and she's like, "Oh my gosh, it's so great to meet you. This is like the best program. Where you been?" You know, she was just like, you know, we haven't seen these kind of results in any other graduate program that has won this award in the past. And it was very affirming, because sometimes you do what you do because you love it, but you don't realize the difference that you're making. And so for this woman who is in education, who is in Washington, D.C., to say, you know, this is like an exceptional program, really helped me understand too that what we were doing was really, really important, and we needed to continue to do it. With or without resources. We're a staff of 2 people, really, and students. We work with students. We pick the best students to work with us, of course, and then we do amazing work. And you know what's been really gratifying as well? That we maybe have had 20 students or so, no more, I'm sure we've had more. And about 2/3 of those students have gone on to do PhD studies after working in our office. And some of them are professors now, like Eric Barreto, who's at Lutheran Seminary, and he's now tenured. He worked in my office. That is the way. I think committed partners that understand that the Hispanic community is growing, that they want to make a commitment to that, and that they when they sign up a student in a PhD program, they immediately think, this is a student we want to send to the HTIC as an HTIC scholar.
Other questions that you might have for Joanne before we close this section? No? Well, Joanne, we want to present you with a couple of flowers. We know you're traveling, so it's a small bouquet. It represents a huge bouquet for you. For your work. To Latinas, and especially because this month is the month of women. So as a woman in this ministry, we really thank you for doing that. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Jara, would you like to give some information about the information we have out there?
Yes. So throughout the week, and we started today, you're going to see 4 different stands outside. If you want to donate or if you want to pledge, anybody can do it. So we have 4 different organizations that we want to give to. One of them is a church in Peru. It's a evangelical church in Peru. It's this woman that she works at the squatting, that's what you call it. So it's a space, una invasión humana, and she's a pastor there, and she's doing magnificent work, and she's setting up a lunchroom for the community there, and we want to help with that. And also we have scholarship fund for a Cuban church, Presbyterian Cuban church, that we felt touched to do. So when we went to a Cuba trip 2 weeks ago, if you want to support that with $1, you can give one student a whole day of tutoring. for their application to enter the university. So just $1 gives them 1 whole day of tutoring. And also we have for the Raíces Latinas scholarship fund that we're setting up, and the water project, which is Xochi's endeavor with a friend in Texas, Arizona. So he leaves water out for people that are crossing the border, and she collects, and everybody else, everywhere she stands, like we all give whatever we have. If you have just a penny, just put a penny in. Because all of that is for this person that's doing that work there in Arizona.
People die crossing the border all the time, and a lot of people don't value their lives, and so they don't care about them. But this man goes out and puts water every Saturday in all these different places so that people don't die of thirst.
So with whatever you can and you have, or you feel that you can or will, give, it would be wonderful. So that's going to be here today and every day during the week of our events. And you can just wander around, see what it's out there in the display. Also eat more food until 7 o'clock when we start our panel on Latina Spirituality with Cláudio Carvalhaes, and responding would be our companion and student here, Ricardo. So thank you for coming, and I hope you stay for a little while.
Thank you.
We're very fortunate today to have Cláudio Carvalhaes. ¿Sí se pronuncia? Carvalhaes, ¿sí? Es mi versión en español. No puedo hacer ese acento brasileño. Pero we're very happy that he accepted the invitation to come and speak about Eucharist and the elements of Latino spirituality. We met this summer at the Hispanic Summer Program, and some of the students from here, from Boston University that went, recommended that we bring him back here to share with us. He's an associate professor of worship and liturgy at the Lutheran Theological Seminary in Philadelphia, originally from the beautiful country of Brazil, Sao Paulo. We consider you, Cláudio, a liturgist, a theologian, an artist, an activist, a writer, and a mentor for a lot of the new students in the PhD programs, as well as the Hispanic Summer Program. But more important is your experience, the way you share your experience as a pastor in the local congregations with everyone around you. So thank you for being here with us today.
Wow. I am so delighted to be here, really. I'm really happy to be here and learn about the work that you do. Thank you all for having me. See, I was the chair of the Hispanic Latina caucus at Union Theological Seminary. And one great story that I have is that, how institutions don't push much for the Hispanic Latino group, right? You always have to push, and where are they, and where's the efforts and the money, and to bring students here. So that's everywhere, right? Of course not here, but everywhere else.
Not here.
And so one day I was so mad at pushing it. So one day I said, okay, let's do this. We're going to invite the community to do a worship, and we invite them to do the funeral of the Latina Hispanic caucus. And then they, what is this, right? And so we went to chapel, and we did the procession of the coffin, and we went all the way, and we put there on the float, and then everybody there was just mourning. And so people came to do the eulogy, so it was so important for union, and and people had no clue what was going on, right? And then what we are trying to say is that without this community, everybody's dead. It's not only us. So and to give this very more dramatic feeling of it. And so that's why I love liturgy, to create these dramatic spaces for us to engage. So then we invite people to give the final goodbye to the Latino caucus. And so when people would come and do the line and look, inside of the caucus there was a mirror. So they look at themselves. And so that was incredible to do it.
Yeah.
So of course some people didn't like it much. But it was a way of trying to, they have done much better. Not because of the service, but we always have to push, right? You always have to say where is it? Where's the commitment to diversity? So I know the struggles of doing it, but I'm so glad to see you all here and powerful people here to push this, and so I'm so glad that you're doing this work here. So my prayers are with you, and as we continue this work. So I just want to introduce a friend of mine, Rui Costa. Rui Costa is my Brazilian friend from the south of Brazil. He's an alum. He studied here. They told me not to say when. But he's from Brazil and did his PhD here. And his dissertation was a comparison between Miguel Bonino and Ruben Alves. And fantastic work that he did here. And he was telling me about this conference that he did here, bringing all of the liberation theologians from Latin America, Mark Ellis, and others to do a conference here. And there's a book that came out, it's called Ethics of Solidarity.
It's called Theology of Solidarity. Towards the Theology of Solidarity.
Yes. So that was done here, and so there is a good way for him just to have those good memories of this time sitting here. So it was good also to come with him because then he knew where to bring me. Otherwise I would be lost. So Eucharist as an element of Latin spirituality, right? Sharing at the table. So to talk about the sacraments are fundamental to most of the Christian faith, right? And perhaps the Eucharist, or the Lord's table, or the Lord's Supper, is perhaps one of the most important rituals in the Western world. And so, my dissertation was on Eucharist and globalization, redrawing the borders of Eucharistic hospitality, and that came out of three major experiences in my life. And let me say it first, that's what liberation theology and Hispanic and Latino, Latin and Mujerista and womanist theologies have helped us to see, is that the experience of our life are integral to the discourses that we create about God and about our community. So it's not this detached understanding of theology as a scientific object, right? But it happens in our bodies and through our bodies and our experiences. So that what helped me to find permission also to use that and wrestle with the official discourses of theology. So when I think about the sacraments and especially the Eucharist and the Latina spiritualities, I love what the Mujerista theology said about the cotidiano, right? The daily life, the dailiness of life that is so saturated with a symbolic power, with theological depth that the women are helping us to recover. So the two experiences that made me think about the Eucharist was my home. My mother had an extended family, and so you control my time, please. My mother had an extended family, very poor people, and we were poor too, but they were even worse than us. And so every time they would come to visit us, what time would they come? Lunchtime, mealtime, usually lunch. And I knew that when the bell was ringing about 11:30, 11. I knew there was the 6, 7, 8, 9 people there waiting to come in. And I knew that my lunch was over. because sometimes my mom would tell me to go buy some things, but sometimes we wouldn't have much to buy. So she would say, well, we'll fix your lunch later. Don't take the food. I will fix you something afterward. So I knew that these people who were uninvited guests would come to my house, take my house, take over my food, and I would have to go then to school with, if I could find like a piece of bread with butter, that would be it. And so I started really like this, not, let's put it, not so Christian feelings about these people. And that associated not only with the family, but with the poor, that I could call them poor because they're poorer than me. And so there was this class distinction. See, feelings are structured in the ways in which we organize society, right? So when you have the class struggle, the feelings of love and hatred and all of the shades of our feelings, it is manifested through the structure of society. So class struggle is one way of expressing your feelings, your thinking. It goes through that so fundamentally, so inextricably related to it. So then I established that as a class struggle right there. And the fact that my mom would always give the food to them and not to me, that was, how come my mother doesn't love me? Because she loves these people more. Because I'll go hungry and they'll go like, hey, we're here. Our bellies are full now, and here I go to school like cussing them or anything I could say about them. So that was one way of understanding the table, the eating together, always to be given to somebody else first. My second experience came from as a pastor of this very poor community in Brazil, in the outskirts of São Paulo, in a place called Santa Fé. It was a small Presbyterian church, with also people from the poorest areas there, from the favela. And it was a precious community. It was perhaps the best time of my life as a pastor, but it was so hard to be pastor because we didn't have much money, right? And my second month there, the treasurer comes to me and said, "Hi, Pastor, how are you?" I said, "I'm good. I'm good news. I'm good. See the sun today?" Yes. I mean, we don't talk about weather in Brazil, right? Like we do here. I'm good. Yeah, it's very nice, right? The sun, yeah. Oh, did you see our soccer team? We have the same soccer team, Corinthians. And they said, "Oh, did you see Corinthians? He's gonna play this afternoon." I said, yeah, it'll be great. Yeah. And how was your week? So, that was good. That was very nice. That was great. And so we're talking. And then afterwards, I said, what do you want to tell me? What do you want to tell me? And said, well, yes, we cannot pay you. We have no money. I mean, in Brazil, I mean, we don't do church with budget. Here in the United States, I feel like if you don't have a budget, you don't have church. Yeah. First comes, I mean, I think John 1:1 should be at the beginning was the budget, and the budget was with God, and the budget was God. And that's the incarnation of the capital that made us alive. And we depend on the capital to survive. And if we take the capital away, Jesus is just this mini thing that I pretty much don't need it. So we would go month by month with our offerings, right? But even if they couldn't pay me, I would spend the whole Sunday there, and at the end of the day, I would leave with this bags of food for the entire week, way more than I needed. You know, they would get a chicken, kill the chicken that hour day, or just to give the whole chicken to me. Well, already cooked, yeah, because I was from the city, I didn't know what to do with chicken. But and this gumerino, the treasurer would always put $5 in my pocket every Sunday. That would pay my way in and back to my house. So because of the absence of money, I tapped into a certain kind of solidarity, a certain kind of spirituality that I would never perceive if we had this abundance of money. The connections, what hold us together, the glue, was the solidarity, was that we needed to keep each other. That was the glue. That it was not the budget that we were able to make. So that was the second experience. And the third one was when I was a pastor of a non-documented community here in Massachusetts. I was in Fall River. It's a small town, I don't know if you know, it's near New Bedford. I came to be a pastor of this community, and see, to be a pastor of a non-documented community is pretty tough. I was the only one with documents. And it's a place of no agency. Right? What can they do? If they raise their voices, La Migra will come and get them. So it is very hard to work with people like that. And then Rui also worked with communities of non-documented people too, and he helped me a lot when I first got here. And so it is a different way of reasoning the faith. Because then, as a pastor of these people, I had to help them to do things that I'm not supposed to do. That's right. And so when I told my presbytery that I was dealing with non-documented, they said, no. So then we cannot do some things. Now, well, unless we are there with them, we cannot do ministry. And so the Eucharist and the sacraments became a place for healing. A community that is not much aware of the systemic oppression, the systemic racism and violence. They do not get it because of the language. I mean, new in this country and don't know exactly. So it's very hard to read the entire reality. But fear is so alive. I mean, you breathe fear, right, all the time. So the Eucharist and baptism was a way of and the liturgy in general was a way of providing healing and providing different ways of creating the grammar of our faith. So we say that prayer is the grammar of our faith. So it is helping them to create a enlarged grammar, to pray in a more expansive way about things that they never heard in church to pray. So that this kind of prayer with different themes and issues and concepts. So this prayer was the feeding of the theology. So have you heard of the lex orandi, lex credendi? It's the lex orandi is the law of prayer, and the lex credendi is the law of belief. So which one feeds what? Today, all of our churches are about you first believe, then you can pray, right? And I think their church was a little different, even though they were all together, intertwined. But there was a way like you create your prayer, then you figure out what you believe out of your prayer. So it is when you pray about non-documented people in a situation of no documents, of fear. So you have to start at grammar that wasn't there before. Metaphors, languages, images. So that's pretty much what liberation theologists had to do. To start with a new grammar. I'll talk about feminist, womanist, mujerista theologists, for instance. They had to create a new language that wasn't there before. Right? So the healing aspect of the liturgy, of the sacraments, of eating together. And there was no distinction between the Eucharist on the altar table and the food that we'd eat in the basement afterwards. So sometimes the food at the basement would be more Eucharistic than the Eucharist itself, because there is where we shared our lives and everything. So when I think about spirituality, I think about the places in which we are that help us to develop, create, expand our spiritualities. Always related to our bodies and to our experiences. So the question that I had in my book and was, what is it that makes the sacrament a sacrament a sacrament? What is it? What are the criteria? Is it the order of the ritual? So you do A plus B plus C plus D equals E? Or is it the presence of the priest, the pastor? Is it the presence of the people? What is it? So the whole book is about that. And then the question is, depending on the people that are around the table, the altar, does it change the Eucharist? Should it change the Eucharist? Should it change the way that you pray the Eucharist? How much hospitality should we give? How much of the Eucharist, of the sacraments, are open or should be open? I mean, what I try to do is to show how the Eucharistic ritual is all surrounded by borders. All borders of all kinds. Sexual, gender, race. All the power dynamics to get where God is. I mean, there's an enormous, there are layers of power around it, right? That we need to check. So the Eucharistic table and altar, depending on the tradition that you are, is filled with of marked borders, and we feel that there's no borders around, right? And so it's filled with it. So those are the things that I try to wrestle with, and then we are as the ones who are doing theology and studying theology and engaging with theology. We are the ones who are what Gramsci would call the organic intellectual. I think we are the organic theologians, the organic liturgists, the organic pastoral care. We are the ones who have to get to relate the systematic thinking and engage with the life of the people, and empower the people with that which has been the tradition all along, and empower them with it. And at the same time, using the lives and experience of our people to also move and change the systematic ways of doing theology. So it's a circular movement that we have to do. That's our task, right? And so that's why we always need to have, for me, any kind of ministry that we need to do as scholars or pastors, and the connection with the people. Unless we have our foot planted on the ground where the people are, we are going to have a theology without teeth. That will just be for somebody. But as long as it has the potential to change people's lives, and that's when we are perhaps closer to what I believe should be the theologies that would be important for our people. So when we think about all these movements, right? Let me give you three examples of the spirituality around the table from three different cultures. First, let me tell you about the Brazilian spirituality. Do you all know about the ecclesiastic community of base, the Comunidade Eclesiástica de Base, which it came within the liberation theology in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s. It was a group of people who started to read the Bible from their perspective, the perspective of the poor. So they were not guided by the official reading, but it started at the ground. So they started to read the Bible from the social conditions of their lives, right? And so when it hit the sacrament, that was very complicated. Because when they wanted to do it, I said, wait. Don't you read the Bible? Fine. But you change the sacrament? Not really. Because see, when our theologies, when it is a little away from the ritual, it's easier, so to speak. But when we get to the rituals, to challenge the rituals, that is when really things really get very scary. So the whole sense of the sacrament. So the poor people started to want to do the Eucharist because they didn't have priests or pastors there to be with them. So they wanted to do it themselves. But they were not allowed. So then they started to do something else. They started to do, they would do fruit juice, anything of any fruit but grape, so that it wouldn't be too close to the wine. So any other fruit, orange juice or guava or pineapple, whatever. And then they would do the cake of their own communities. I mean, yuca, corn cake, or whatever, they would do it. And so, even Leonardo Boff, who was one of the mentors of liberation theology, when he's writing about that, he's saying, well, they call it the Lord's Supper. They didn't call it Eucharist. And he was, but he was in favor of that, but even he couldn't go beyond the sacrament. So that's my critique to him here in my book, and I told him personally too, and of course he's way beyond that, but what is it that makes a sacrament a sacrament? So when these people do that, what they do is they are complying. That's the fascinating thing that the people do, right? They work with the structure, but against the structure. And it's very, I mean, you cannot say, well, okay, we are not doing the Eucharist because we didn't say the words of the institution. But they're using the same things to do the same thing, to have the same meaning, to have the same effect. But it's not a Eucharist. And so then people don't know what to do. Is it a Eucharist or no? No. We didn't use the elements. It's not Christ. Right? It's not the body of Christ. There's no transubstantiation. But when they eat and drink, that's exactly what they're doing. So that is this is the fascinating thing about the spirituality of our people, that they find their own way to do whatever they want with the symbols of the church and use for their own. And they don't ask permission. And in some ways, the church embraces it. And this is the fantastic thing that so this is just one thing. I mean, popular Catholicism is filled with those fantastic rituals and events. I mean, who created the whole room of miracles? It was not the priest who created the room of miracles. It was the people. So now every church now has a room with all of these wax parts of the body, legs, arm, nose, ear, breast, because of the healing. So the whole fantastic ways in which people create and recreate the faith from their own perspective. So that's, I think, a lot of our spirituality is. And the more we look at this, the more we expand the possibilities of our own living with God. And I think all of us have something in our houses that our mothers or grandmothers did. I mean, an object or something of a prayer or something that, I mean, if that was brought to the church, they would put them in, I don't know, give some kind of a reprimand, but it was just part of the daily life. So that's one thing about the Brazil. So in some ways, Nancy Pereira Cardoso would say that the poor will work with the crumbs that fall from the table. But it will be a way of sacralizing or the crumbs as that which still strengthens them to fight. Then you see the leftovers are nothing, are just like leftovers. The power is that they turn it into a sacred food that will turn into their own strength. So then I see there's the Mexican, I went to the borders near the Nogales, the Sonora Desert. So I have this man. I was at a Baptist church. And I don't have the full video here. It's really badly done, but I just want to show it to you. So just to show it to you, this little... He's doing a baptism here, right? It's a Baptist church. So we got there in the morning, and there was singing, and the food was already going on, right? Preparing the food. And so we start, the first thing that you do is start the food. And then there's this long worship service. There's like 3-4 hours that you keep singing and have the preaching, and the pastor invited me to give the sermon. So, but before they took some of the water away from this, because this was the container for three things. This was the water reservoir for the community. And then this was the baptismal font. And afterwards, when we finish, all the kids go to the pool. So, this is the kind of spirituality that conflates everything, belongs to everything. So there's no distinction or departmentalizing of the faith. I mean, the very condition of their lives, because of the water, it was part of their joy, of the joys of the kids, but also the very condition of their spirituality. So they take the sacrament as a way that functions for the entire life. So it is the very condition of their existence. As the baptism is as key as the water reservoir. You understand that? And the pastor told me this afterwards. Oh, I give them a baptism certificate because when they want to go to US, they just take the baptism certificate as their document. See? I mean, he still believes that, right? But it used to be, right? That's what it used to be, your document, your baptism certificate. That was your identity, your ID. See, the connection, everything is intertwined, interrelated, interconnected. That's the kind of spirituality that we need to learn. Instead of departmentalizing, this is secular, this is sacred, this is not, this is this, this and that. So I was in awe with this church. It was in the midst of the desert. When I need to leave, they let me in the midst of the desert in a road that I didn't see anything. And they said, "Oh, the bus will come." And I said, "When?" "I will come." Okay. And so they leave, and I see the van going, and I'm desperate. I'm just, oh my God, what's going to happen to me? And then it vanishes. And I look to the left. I look to the right. There's nothing. Nobody. What do I do now? So after 2 hours, the bus came, and I almost jump in front of the bus. If you don't take me, kill me. It almost killed me, but no, it didn't. It did took me somewhere else. And so in the Mexican bus, there was John Wayne in a black and white movie going on. It was fantastic. So that was another thing of how we engage the sacraments in a variety of possibilities of ways of feeling the Spirit. How the Spirit, when we talk about spirituality, we're talking about the ways in which the Spirit moves in and out and through us, right? And what we do and who we are. So that's how we deal. So then I wonder, if we think about Puerto Rico, what does it mean? What does it mean to have the Eucharist under the power of an empire? Does it change anything? What does this table, for some traditions, the altar for other traditions, what does it do to the empire? Is it the same prayer? Does it do the same thing? See, that's when the context will shift, change, move, expand, challenge the rituals that we have. Right? So that's the power of the context. Or if the Aymara people in Bolivia, how to develop a Andina theology from the sacraments, when the sacraments are or were the tools of those who killed my people. How do you wrestle with it? And the people have wrestled with it. Sometimes throwing away, sometimes engaging, sometimes renaming, sometimes reusing, and sometimes to honor themselves. Or how we hold the differences between us around this table. We are eating together, right? But we all have different cultures, different ways of eating. I have this friend of mine. He was a pastor in Florida, and with this community of Latina Hispanic community, and he wanted to say once, he wanted to talk about differences and cultural differences. And so what he did was to ask people to do one Sunday, everybody had to cook their own tamales. So the result was that they had more than 20 kinds of tamales. And this is the kind of thing that one would say, well, everybody has the same way of doing tamales, right? And it's so different. And I mean, and it was hard for those who did this one to say, well, this is not tamales. This is tamales. Right? So the cultural changes, cultural challenges. And so he used that to talk about the differences of us and how we handle it. And how are we to create a theological language for these differences around with the grace of God that does not turn us into the same of each other. The grace of God is the grace that works in and with the diversities and keeps the pluralities of this fantastic plethora of human possibilities while holding us there. So when I think about diversity, I think about the tamales and the challenges of me eating somebody else's tamales and say, yours is a tamales too. Another thing, and I'll that's the last one that I want to use. I still want to hear what are the relations between El Día de los Muertos and the Eucharist. For me, there's so much going on there together. I mean, for anybody Mexican here? So you eat in the cemetery. Talk about life and death. I mean, you are in the cemetery celebrating life and celebrating death. I mean, isn't it the Eucharist? What are the major things in the Eucharist? The life of Jesus, the death of Jesus, the resurrection of Jesus. Isn't it? It's so connected. Isn't it? It's the difference is that at the cemetery, Dia de los Muertos, there's joy and you dance and the whole family's there and everybody brings food, and then at the church to celebrate the same thing. Well, not the same thing, but kind of the same thing. Right? And so I wonder, what are the connections of our eating together? What is the spirituality of the Day of the Dead and the spirituality of the Eucharist? What are the connections? I mean, I think that's why one of the I'm just going ahead of myself, but so things. I think that there are two things only that I mentioned that is part of all the examples that I'm giving. One is there's a border hermeneutics in all of them. They're all part of a border. They're always sharing a border. They're all living at the border. Right? Belonging and not belonging. Being part and not being part. Right? Dealing with the known and the unknown. And that's the curse and that's the blessing of our faith. Maria Pineda would say that we need to continue recording untold stories of struggle, hope, and faith around the borders. And the borders, not only Mexico, United States, which we have to go often. And I think we all have to go to the borders. Like, this is our Mecca, if you want to do any theology. Go, I mean, one thing that I do with my students is to take them to the Mexican border, and I put them sitting on the border, and they're sitting there, and here's the shadow of the border, and I give them a Bible and say, now you read the Bible from here. And so what is this place telling you about the story that you're reading now? So there's something that makes it so different than reading it from the pulpit, from a safe place, from a place that everything seems to be controlled. When your family is not somebody of your family trying to cross it, or when somebody from your family has been raped in the process. It's different. So there is a border hermeneutics in every aspect of the spirituality that marks the body, that marks the soul, that marks the mind of our people. The migrant, she continues, the migrant deals with many of the same dangers that the strangers in the Old Testament encountered many times. The real possibility of rejection, of getting lost in our unfamiliar land, and not knowing how to cope with its costumes and structures. So we are always around borders, sexual, familial, social, cultural, economic, cultural, political, and so on. So how do we celebrate God in the midst of it all? Who owns the power of our spirituality? Who creates the reading book of our spirituality? Who writes it? That defines who we are. Can you put that video? Yes. So here's one example of doing the Eucharist. You can put the whole. This is the Eucharist done.
Oh, what happened?
Yes.
If not, is it? I don't know why is this. Try to refresh it, perhaps.
Maybe if you click on the YouTube, it actually go to the site.
Yeah.
Allow one.
Yeah, perhaps. Try again. Let's see. Aha. There you go. That is brought by. I'm getting some money out of this. That's okay. So what it's doing is the dioceses of both sides of the border are putting together binational mass. And they're doing together from both sides. The fascinating thing, you see the table cut by the borders. And this is the subversive way. Well, you put us against each other, but you're going to stay together. So it is a spirituality of resistance. It is at the core of the spirituality of the Latina community. So there is a whole a documentary on this. If you want to get it, it's fantastic actually. This is clearly a sin, a wall of sin and hatred, and we should not let one day pass without us screaming against it. Because the danger of this wall is that it will become a natural landscape for the next generations. It was just as if you start to put a clock on the wall, and you grow up and you see it, you don't even know why it's there, you just see that it was there and it's part of it and should be there. That's why there's a need that spirituality is not something that is stable. Spiritualities are always in flux, in movement. And it depends enormously in the ways in which we engage the Spirit in our lives. We will become spiritually what we will do and not do. What we'll receive and not receive. What we'll see and not see. What will be blessed and not. So it's always in flux. So we are responsible for the well-being of our people in many ways. And we are the ones who have to scream and say, no, no. So there is the border, the hermeneutics of the border is always in as a mark, I would say, as of the Latina, Hispanic spiritualities. And the last thing, it is about life and death as the major matrix of this spirituality. So our spiritualities, our lives are always deeply pierced, transversed by life and death. And I think that's why the Eucharist is so powerful, because it's about life and death. Right? And I think that at the core of our cultures, we are always dealing with life and death so much. Well, just take again, get the Mexican culture and the music. Well, if you want to use the corridos, for instance, is one way. There's always life and death is always there, right? Is the expression of the culture, is the expression of life. Or just get one song that we all sing. Ay, 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 canta y no llores, porque cantando se alegran, cielito lindo los corazones. Sing and don't cry. See, life and death there as pulsing, as also part of the daily life. So this is part of our spirituality, this dealing with life in the midst of death, death eating life, life beginning death, death being stopped by life. So everything is this life and death movement, and that's why the Eucharist is so powerful, because here we deal with life and death. So now there's been a language that is avoiding the death and using more like the mu. And I really don't like it. We have to announce the death, because then when you announce the death, we can, yes, this is important because I know it. My family knows it. There's death. And so, but the only way to get to resurrection is if I go through death. If I go only to a meal, I might not go through resurrection. But if I go through death, then resurrection is coming. So, the spirituality of life and death is about this. It is not about stop crying. It is about singing in the midst of the tears. To bring alegria, to bring joy to us. So it is like we go weeping the loss of our beloved ones to La Migra. Weeping the loss of our children to Maratrucha and 18th Street and all of the gangs. It is weeping the loss of a father who tried to work in a construction site and was killed. Weeping mothers trying to cross the desert to find their children and were raped and killed. And then within this weeping there is singing. Singing the joy of our families. Singing the alegria of our faith. Singing the transforming possibility of this gospel. Singing our solidarity. Singing the possibility that life will always be stronger than death. Singing the strength in La Lucha. Singing the powerful epiphanies of God in our quotidian. So we are always hanging in there. If you put Frida, I wrote a whole article on this one because I think that she said, the dress hangs in there. And here's Mexico and here United States. And she's hanging between the worlds. And there's life and death all mixed. And the dress is the dress of a campesina also. So there's so much. So this is, I think, is a great example of our spirituality. Hanging between places. Looking at it and said, ha ha, yes! And then looking at it again and said, I don't know. Hanging in there, in the midst of life and death, around borders, we feel authentic and unauthentic. We feel we have courage to take the world, and we feel ashamed of what we do. Our spirituality needs God in our communities to give us some assurance of where we come from and where we need to go. But also there's the sense of how much of an imposter we are. So it's common, hanging out with Latina folks, I felt how much this syndrome of the imposter is so great. Because we are against the official discourse, so there's always the sense of, I'm an imposter, but nobody can know that I am. Even though you can have like 10 books published, you still feel like I'm an imposter. Is that the only difference that they haven't found it out yet? And because of this movement, it is a spirituality in the flux that moves. We're always going to places that we did not know we were to go. We are called to places that we had no idea we were being called to. Places, literal places, placed inside of our hearts, of our minds, experiences. And all of a sudden you were there again and again, lost. As Pineda said, not knowing what to do with the customs and the structures of life, and having to figure out ourselves once again. So it's always losing things and gaining things. I think the best translation of the Eucharist comes from, that I saw, is this from this woman, the writer, Brazilian writer called Clarice Lispector. She says, bread is love among the strangers. That's why you're always looking for a comunidad, a community. Because if we are in a community, we know that there will be bread, there will be food. Like today I was talking to Yara and I said, oh, are there going to be dinner there? And she said, no, we don't have, we just have something to munch on. And then immediately after she said, but we'd love to take you to eat. It's the offering of bread among strangers that turns the strangers into a comunidad, into a family. And then we can go. And then we can praise God. And then we can say, I'm ready. Thank you very much.
Want to open it up to questions or comments about what was shared? Or?
Yeah.
I'm still taking it in.
Yeah, I think we have a moment to take it in.
Oh, but you think about it, there was a question that came to mind, Claudio. We just went to Cuba. We had our class that went to Cuba last week. And something that I was really taken by was the fact that in Cuba, all over Latin America, we talk about Latin American liberation theology. In Cuba, they talk about theology in revolution. And the project that theology of liberation is always talking about, we're always talking about getting ready to engage in a process of liberation. But those that stayed in Cuba, the church that did not leave after the revolution, engage in doing theology in a situation of revolution in a socialist system. And it's so different. And as you were asking, what will Eucharist mean? What will be the meaning? Which is giving it to you in terms of what do you believe is the meaning in a context like this, in a socialist country where they went through this process of revolution, and after the revolution, and doing theology and social.
Yes.
What will be the meaning of community?
Yeah. Well, two things. One is that, next time you go, that's the question you should ask there. Then but I think what you're saying is important because it's our common ways of thinking together, right? And in some ways, I think there shouldn't be any theology not done in revolution.
Yeah.
I think we tame this gospel so much that it's just like a toy. Almost like a toy that we play with. Because it never challenged us to do anything. I mean, try to think our faith in a socialist way. I mean, you either won't be patriot or you either not a patriot and a communist, right? Perhaps in that situation, they have just the ambiguities of the system. The things that work and don't. The things to correct, to fix. But they have done so much already.
It's part of the system that everybody goes to school, everybody gets bread, everybody gets medical help. So what does Eucharist?
And here we are, So Eucharist in that sense would be the continuation of life. You eat, you drink, you go to school, you go to the hospital, then you have the Eucharist, and then you go eat, and so it's just like a circle of life. Right? And I think a ritual that will maintain the dream, or will fix the dream, because it's not everything that works, right? So we will fix it, and we'll refine it.
The practice of
yes.
The practice of,
and a way of, that's the way that the major thing in the Eucharist is remembering. So remembering that everybody should eat together, so should eat, everybody should have a health system. So it is a remembering that they do. And so there is the subversive aspect of the memory of Jesus. So the subversive memory of a revolutionary called Jesus Christ in a revolutionary system is very different in a place where Jesus is never seen as a revolutionary, where the Eucharist is never revolution, that it doesn't propose anything else beyond the very walking through to get this meager bread and the sip of wine. While this would have to challenge us, well, this is called it's eating together. So that means this. As I take the bread, I have to ask you, my sister, have you eaten this week? Do you have enough? And you ask me, do you have enough drink? And as we go and take it, the next question that we will do as we partake the bread and the wine is to say, do you have health insurance? If you don't, this community will have to provide for you. Because this is a demand, it's not a choice. So in some ways, the state helped to push these things. But we cannot push these things to our people, because if we say, you need to do this, your member of your church will come to you and say, don't tell me what to do because I know what to do. So here, all of the complaints are individual. I'm offended. I'm not going to listen to you. I don't like it. I don't want it. I don't want it. It's like money. Giving money is not an option for us. It's a demand. It's a demand. Resting on the Sabbath is a demand. It's not like something that we should just like opt to do. I mean, care for you, for each other, is not if I am nice. Because you're not nice. It's a demand. I have to care for you if I like it or not. It doesn't matter. I have to make sure that you have something to eat, a place to live, and health care, and a possibility to go to school, so on and so forth. I think perhaps there the set of questions would be different. Yeah.
Questions?
to say just more than a question, Cláudio. I have been working with a community of immigrants here in Massachusetts for almost 4 years now.
Mm-hmm.
And something that I found when I came to this community was that the kitchen was so important.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't understand at the beginning why. I thought, okay, these women are always fighting about tamales, which one is the real tamal, and which one is the best salsa, and all that stuff. And after a while, I understood it was not about tamales, it was not about salsa. It was about eating together. And then doing some research, I came across Dr. Ruisieta. And he talks about a theology of accompanamiento. And he used this Latin word for acompañamiento, which is with bread. This is the root in Latin. So we celebrate in our church, we celebrate the Lord's Supper once a month. But really what I'm beginning to understand is that we celebrate the Lord's Supper the other 3 Sundays better than the first Sunday when we have
The official
communion. And it's really hard for the whole of us to understand that that's real, even though in our minds we think, no. This is the Lord's Supper and this is the convivial. But really, I think it's the other way around.
I love it. I love it when you don't know the distinction. It's even better. That's fantastic. Yes. Great. Thank you. Very good. Very good. And I think there's a lot of that. This crossing of meaning that we don't talk about is just there. That's what sustains a community. Thank you.
I'm just curious if you would draw any distinctions between the way in which you're expressing a Eucharistic spirituality in a Latino context from a Protestant or Catholic perspective. I mean, you're speaking, I think, as a Protestant scholar and pastor, but you're also observing communities that are Catholic in the border Mass. Do you see any distinction as you look at these 2 communities and their theologies in terms of the way in which you understand the fluidity of spirituality, the relationship between the bread and the fellowship, eating table? Just wondering if you would, is it the same, or are there important distinctions there?
Well, there are significant theological distinctions right there. And the whole debate of within the Reformation was where and how God is at the altar or at the table. Right? So then you have Catholics with the transubstantiation, the Lutherans with God is in, around, and under the elements, but not the elements. And then you have Calvinists would say that there's a real presence, and then you have Zwinglians would say that is the symbol of God, and then you go on with other possibilities. So theologically, it is very different, right? Because one thing when you say that God is fully there in a very clear, manifested, objective, material way. The other thing is to say that God is spiritually there. There's an enormous difference there, right? So much so that the spirituality, the Roman Catholic spirituality has that the Corpus Christi would never happen in a Protestant environment, because you take Jesus Christ to the streets, and if you touch it, you heal, right? And so Protestants would never do that. But I think what is similar is the unmarked sense of the altar. I mean, The borders are there, but we all think there are any borders around the table. So that's the same. And so the access to the table or the altar are marked by those borders that will allow you or not to get close to it. That's one thing. The other thing is that I think there's an assumed, for some parts of all denominations, that it implies the social aspect of the kingdom of God, for instance. But you don't need to say it. If you keep the Eucharistic prayers the way they are, it will do. So in a sense, there is a feeling of what is it called, the Latin ex opere operatus, which means if you do the ritual the way it is, it will happen. Just by the fact that you're doing it properly. So in that sense, all of the churches also have this feeling that if you do it in this way, it will do something. Right? And so there are a lot of commonalities in that regard, and issues of power and so on and so forth. What I'm trying to do is to say, well, what if the universal prayer, Eucharistic prayer, is rather reframed in contextual perspective? So if I put the table here, but that's the thing. Here is the same prayer, Eucharistic prayer. It doesn't change anything, but changes the singing, changes the Bible reading, changes the sermon. What I'm after is that how this will create a totally different Eucharistic prayer. Do we need it or not? I mean, if I have a group of people that are refugees from Syria, would that change my prayer? And in my book, I tell one story. Imagine that if a group of non-documented people are running away from the migration, from the La Migra, like the immigration, the ICE, and then comes inside of your church. What do? Do you pray the same prayers? Do you keep the same bulletin that you had prepared on Tuesday evening? Or you do it again? Or you create something? I mean, because you are inside of the church, of a building, perhaps you do the same. But what if you are transposed into the Syrian refugee camp? Would you say the same prayers? And I'm not saying that you have to get rid of those prayers, but you engage those prayers that we have received through tradition, through this 2,000 years of wisdom, and along with the prayers that are coming from the other places of our beings. Like, I am in a refugee camp, and what do I do now? How do I pray? So, and I think that's the task of contextual theology. I mean, Elie Wiesel, in his book Night, he's looking at this child burning. So they say, so how can I talk about God now? Is it different?
Thank you. Your talk was fascinating, and I think what I'm wrestling with is there a Latino Eucharistic spirituality or something in Latino culture that transcends these theological, ecclesial distinctions, Protestant, Catholic, which have been so charged around the Eucharist? Is that what you're pointing to? Or are there ways in which Latino spirituality and culture is instantiated but differently within those different context communities? So
Brilliant.
thank you for your...
I think you're right on. I think it's both ends.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's both ends.
Both
I would like to add, I mean, if I was going to point as a contextual theologian, if I was going to point to a common, I mean, first of all, my reaction is, well, there's a big assumption that there is a monolithic, one community, and we have many communities. So it's very difficult to find something. And even when you think of Protestants and Catholics, it depends where the individuals are. I mean, are they first generation Protestants? Did we grow up? I mean, some of us only know the Protestant experience, therefore we learn some intrinsic practices about the communion elements and all of that. And the same thing with the Catholics. If Catholics learn, if they were born into the Catholic faith and then changed to the Protestant faith, there will be some difference on how they view it. And I've seen in the Methodist Church, those that are very recent Protestants, that is still, when they come to receive it, it's just, because it's so intrinsic in them, so internalized how they learned it within the Catholic faith. It doesn't matter how much I teach and how much I say, they will come to the Methodist table with their faith in there. But I think deeper, the one thing that I will point to as I continue my research, and I really resonated with what you're talking about, El Día de los Muertos, this whole thing of flux and kind of going back and forth and from and to life and death. I mean, I will then point to what was there before Christianity, going back to the Nahuatl tradition that is a common element through the continent. The indigenous traditions that tend to be more common across the different countries, especially, there will be 2 or 3 large groups where and then we go to the Catholic point of reference of Our Lady of Guadalupe, where in that symbol you have even that. It's not interpreted at all, and will never be interpreted like that in the Catholic doctrine. But you have right there in that symbol this fluidity and communication of something that is deeper than the Christian faith within us, that has to do with Huatlicue, which is the whole maintenance of balance between life and death, and the nurturing of life into death and death into life, and in relationship to the whole of creation, and where the human beings are part of it. So if there was a common thing, I will have to go back before Christianity. If we're talking about a Latino common theme, I will have to go beyond Christianity, because in the Protestant it's very contextual, and then we really need to get into the individualistic culture of this country also. Because I think also, if I was going to point to maybe another common element, is that maybe regardless of where this happens, it's practiced individually, in the most Protestant way of learning, but in our communities, very easily, it's like, no, it's not individual, it's communal. So the language and the sense of how we go about it, that's why, the Sunday, the once a month is very individualistic, but the 3 times a week, a month, is a communal. We fight in the kitchen and we serve the food, and that's the collective communal experience, which will I point. So those might be, but again, it's not one. There are 2 and very contextual. In the United States, that's the way we are a community in the kitchen, because what we learn in the culture here is individualistic. One on Sunday morning, as we receive it from the priest, as we receive it from the pastor.
And I will add to that is what we bring and what will be common. It doesn't matter if Protestant or Catholic, is a struggle and how we come to the table. That's what brings us all together, no matter what denomination or church we belong to. Our struggle in coming into the table and being, celebrating our pueblo as we come in to celebrate life and death, Christ. That is just us.
And it's interesting that we can even bridge differences, deep differences of theology through the struggle. Which you would not think about. You would think it has to be one or the other, and not necessarily. It depends. It's very contextual. Again, we can come across amazing differences because of the struggle.
Right.
And immigration struggle is one that really, in the context of the United States, helps us to come together.
May I say just something? There is just know about the communion table, Eucharist, but it's about all traditional Christian practices that are reshaped, reinvented, recreated in the Latina context. So it's kind of, your question was who write the books of our spirituality?
Yeah.
And I would say we are writing those.
But not in the traditional.
No,
we
no.
write in another way.
Yes, we are writing as we are living
Yes.
our faith in our communities and people that, I mean, like one Sunday after we have communion, the official communion in our congregation, I always use a big bread, so I broke the bread and everything. But also we use the little cups and the pieces. So after we celebrate community, somebody took whatever was left in the big bread and took it to the kitchen. So the kids came to me and say, Pastor, can we eat that bread? And some of the elders say, no. And I say, why not? And that's the Catholic background coming out, you know. Well, this is the bread of the communion. I said, so what do you want me to do with it? I don't know. Maybe you need to eat it. Right? So he brought a whole conversation, and I wondered if some of the kids were hungry. So it's like we are writing new liturgies. We are writing new books about what's going on. And that you could talk about worship, singing, reading the Bible.
Everything.
Is a whole new world.
That's right. Exactly.
Other comments or questions? Yes.
This kind of, well, I came in late, and I'm not sure if this came up in conversation, but what I've heard really reminds me of what I read from Mendes Montoya, where he speaks about Mexican mole, and it kind of points to what you all are talking about, how this is a very individualistic society. But there's also, in this culture, very, we don't have time to just sit and taste the food.
Right.
And he points to what he calls sabor versus saber. To taste is to know. And so in this society, we don't have time to just sit down and taste and to see that God is good. So I'm not sure if you wanted to add on to that.
That's fantastic. I think there's a theologian who he knows well, Ruben Alves, who will talk a lot about the savory also of the knowledge too, right? And I think that is the challenge for us living here, is the time together. And we are eaten up by the time here, so we come with this sense of this longer meal, staying together. But when we get here, we just are just eaten up, literally. Sí, lo tragamos. We are eaten up by the time. So the same verb, the same eaten up. We're eaten up by the time, so we don't have time. So the whole sense of, and everything in this country has to do with some kind of gain. I mean, you go to McDonald's, and if you order like double the size of your Coke for 50 cents, you are gaining some money, because if you were paying for exactly the same amount, blah, blah, blah. So there's the gaining thing that has been attached to food. And you gain time if you go eat at McDonald's or this fast food thing. You gain time. And we often do in our schools meals to do business, right? And the brown bags, the same thing. And so I think there's a way in which we need to restitute the snapshots of the Sabbath in the food. I mean, I know this. You know the New York Theater Company, the ones who put together Rent. I went there and I had like a whole semester as an intern there when I was at Union. And the guy who created it is a former Southern Baptist guy. And I mean, Southern Baptist Church is not known for its sacramentality, right? The meal, no, right? You do a Eucharist once a semester, once a year. But what he did at the building, so it's 3 floors, and he has a kitchen in every floor and no meeting place. Every time they need to do something together is around food, and then there's a ritual first. You eat and you ask about each other. Then afterwards you're gonna after you're fed. I mean, that changes completely. If you're gonna go into ministry and you wanna deal with your session, eat first. And you see how all of the animosity, how it will just go down, because there's something about this eating. And I think it's one way that our churches are countercultural. Even though our services, brother, are so much taken by the same culture, I mean, we cannot, well, sometimes some churches won't, a lot of churches, especially Protestants, right, won't do, well, Catholics will have Eucharist anyways, otherwise it's not a Mass. But Protestants will only do Eucharist when, they know there's a longer service. And you don't do often. Why? Because, you take too much time. You go beyond the 1 hour golden hour that God has given to us. It's in the book of Astrocopileptus, chapter 5, verse 3, that shall do not pass 1 hour of service. Otherwise, we're going to burn in hell. So that it is the time that defines who we are, that defines our eating together. And so you're right on to name that. So in that sense, our culture, especially I think the cultures that are used to eating in the longer, like in a familia, in a more like, I mean, and the Hispanic, Latino communities, they are used to that. A longer thing, you arrive and you don't know what time it's going to start, and you don't know what time it's going to end, and I mean, you don't make much plans. Or if you invite somebody at your house, you never know what time they're going to leave. That's the thing. I mean, being here now, I'm concerned, because now I'm so much taken by this time thing that I know if I invite a Latino, Latina, Brazilian, I don't know. I mean, I am at the mercy of their will. I mean, if they want to stay, they stay. And if they want to sleep, then they will. And it's okay, can I sleep here? Sure. It was very different from when I was in Switzerland, my first time away from Brazil. So this guy invited me to go to his house, and he said, well, from 7 to 9, let's go home. And so I don't hear it, right? I mean, culturally, I don't hear 7 to 9. I know it starts at around 7. So I'm kind of 7, I was getting together, and then the phone of the place rings, and so the guy's already there, saying, oh, yes. So it took me 10 minutes to get there, but I don't know. Yeah. So then I go there, and so we eat, and so afterwards we ate, and we are looking at books, and I don't know why people, have you seen that people that are inviting you, they want to show pictures of your own country? They have 2 books of pictures from Brazil, and they had all in front of the table. And I had to go, São Paulo, Rio, yes, I've been there perhaps 120 times. Yes, this, I mean, so when it's 9, he literally does this. So, well, thank you very much for coming. And he does that, and I'm just like, I said, what? 9? 9 o'clock. Thank you very much. Sure. Am I supposed to go? Yes. Okay. And so that is the strangeness of timing, right? So. What time is it now? Yes. 8:30. There's a light in the camera that is saying like end it. Battery's going down.
No more film to film. But before we conclude, though, I do want to recommend to you his Claudio's book, Eucharist and Globalization, where he addresses some of what he has shared with us tonight, but a lot of other examples and more in-depth in the topics that he showed. I believe we have it in the library if you want to check it out, but I recommend you buy it.
Thank you so much.
It's a good reference. Any other closing comments before we
I'm glad you're here. Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
So honored to be here. Thank you.
We want to present you something
We have a
before
gift for
we
you.
go as a sign of appreciation for you taking the time. We know we contacted you kind of late and you made all kinds of arrangements to come, so we really thank
So
you
delighted.
for being here. We have prepared a little gift.
Oh, I like it.
Talking about food and
Yeah.
flavor. We prepared some goodies.
Oh, that's lovely. Oh, thank you. Thank you so
From the
much.
Latino Student Association. We thank you for being here. Thank you.
Lovely.
We wrote on it Latina and Raíces
Raíces
Latinas.
Latinas, qué lindo.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Can I have a picture with you all to take with me?
Claro.
Sure. Então, por favor, if we can all get, no, you stay there. No, you stay here. You stay here. Yes, let me, is that okay?
Yep.
Okay.
Excellent.
If you come here so that I can, come here, all here. Is that okay? We can all together.
Did you leave Claire?
Yara, vamos.
Excellent.
Yara, venga aquí.
Do we want to go on the floor? Shall we go on the floor? Yeah.
All right. 1, 2, 3.